Capitola City Council meeting to order and welcome everyone here in person. Thank you for making the trek to come down here tonight, and thank you everyone at home for watching. We really appreciate it. May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Peterson? Here. Councilmember Termini?
Here.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Here.
Councilmember Bator?
Here.
Mayor Harlan?
Here. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's meeting is cablecast live on Charter Communications Cable Television Channel 8 and AT&T Uverse Channel 99, and it's being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Wednesday at 8 a.m. and on Saturday following the first rebroadcast at 1 p.m. on Charter Channel 71 and Comcast Channel 25. Meetings can also be viewed from the city's website, www.cityofcapitola.org. Our technician tonight is Jen Cameron. Thank you very much. And as a reminder, please turn off your cell phones, and when you come up, sign in if you'd like your name spelled correctly in the minutes. May we have a report on closed session, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Harlan, members of the City Council. There was one item on this evening's closed session that was labor negotiations with all represented bargaining groups and unrepresented. Council received a report from and gave direction to its negotiator, but there was no reportable action.
Do we have additional materials, our city clerk?
Yes, we received 7 items for the only item on the agenda, 4-1.
Thank you. There's copies of them in the back, I think. Yes. We received an email with all of them this afternoon. We don't have oral communications on tonight. We're just going to get right into the meeting, but if there's anything that anyone would like to announce that's burning, any issues, this would be a good time to do it. If there's something you'd like to let the public know, any council member or staff member or anyone from the public that has an item that you would like to let everybody in Capitola know about. Otherwise, we'll just go right into our business tonight, which is the continued public hearing.
Ask the public first? Or?
Well, we have a staff presentation, I think, first.
We have no public. She said there's no public.
I thought we were required to do public comment regardless whenever we were in open session.
Not in a special meeting?
No, special meetings are generally restricted only to public comment on the item on the agenda.
Let me know when that changes again, and thanks Surfing Santa, did a great job, and I like living in a town where one of the council members is out there on a Sunday straightening out the city's Christmas trees out there. So, Ed, nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's why I asked if there were anyone from the public who did want to speak now. Announcements. This is the time for announcements. Would you like to make one?
I just want to remind everyone, skating rink's coming to Capitola. Yeah, so
December
look for
15th.
That. Yeah,
December
first time.
15th.
Very exciting.
Any other announcements or public comments or comments from council? Then we'll go right into our business tonight, which is continued public hearing. Katie.
Okay, thank you, City Council. So we met last week on the 22nd. Due to the holiday and people not being available that had reached out, the City Council discussed items, but we did not do a technical first reading of the zoning code update. We will not be doing a first reading tonight. We've come back. We're returning with additional information that you requested, and we'll be then moving forward with the adoption hearings in January. So I just want to make that clear to the public that tonight's not the last night for the zoning code. We're going to go over a few things, get your direction. We'll be back in January. So just a quick overview of the process to date. Back in 2010, the city initiated a general plan update, a zoning code update, and a climate action plan. The general plan was worked on from 2011 to 2013 with adoption in 2014. The zoning code was put on hold, not run simultaneously. So once the general plan was adopted, we jumped into the zoning code update. And the zoning code is a reflection. It puts into practice all the big picture thinking that's in your general plan. To initiate the zoning code update, we had stakeholder and public outreach meetings in 2014, moved on to issues and options where we identified the largest issues within the zoning code and got direction from Planning Commission and City Council how to move forward with those, which options they'd like to put into the code. We drafted the code. We're under the 3rd official draft that's been publicized. And throughout the process, we've had Planning Commission and City Council give red lines that have been included in each update. And now we're on to our adoption hearing. So in September, Planning Commission reviewed the code you have in front of you this evening, and it has their red lines in it. And once we move forward with adoption, the next step will be to submit this to the Coastal Commission. The zoning code has 5 parts. We've gone over this. I'll just keep it really brief, but it's been organized in a way in which it's more easy to use than the old code, with the zoning districts and overlays within Part 2 and any standard that applies citywide within Part 3. And then Part 4 is the permits and administration, explaining what an applicant needs to do in order to get a permit. So back on June 1st, we initiated the 60-day public review. We placed documents at the library, here at City Hall. It was online. We received public comment for that 60-day period. Planning Commission reviewed all the public comments during their September 6th meeting. We went through the items, and they gave us direction. On November 22nd, last week, the City Council had a redlined version of with Planning Commission's red lines. We had discussion, but we did continue the hearing due to the holiday week and wanting to give all community members a chance to weigh in on any concerns they have on the document. And so this evening, I've come back with 4 main topics that you asked us to bring back, as well as Councilmember Bertrand gave me another list that I've got slides for each of those items as well. So the first item we're going to discuss tonight is the vacation rental overlay and the inclusion of 488 Riverview Drive. I put this up first because it's my understanding that Councilmember Termini will have to recuse himself due to the proximity to your residence. So thank you.
I live within 300 feet of this residence, so I will step out of the room. Best of luck.
Okay.
Oh, you read my mind.
Okay. Last week we've had public comments submitted, and then the property owner of 488 Riverview came and spoke to the City Council asking that her property be included within the vacation rental overlay. The vacation rental overlay has been a main point of interest throughout the zoning code update. We've talked about it in Planning Commission meetings as well as City Council. Right now, the boundary that has been established has created a clean boundary up Capitola Road to Riverview, and it ends here at Riverview on the south side. And it also includes 502 Bula across the street. Another public comment did come in this week regarding the 500 block of Capitola Avenue. I did not put slides together regarding that. It's been considered before as part of the, as whether or not to add it to the vacation rental overlay, and we've had clear direction from Planning Commission and City Council not to extend the TRO further up Capitola Avenue. If you'd like to discuss that, we can tonight, but I didn't include slides. The request was not to include it in the TRO, but to actually add it as a portion of the land use table, having an exception for nightly rental for Capitola Avenue within that block.
Was that picture taken recently? See the gates gone.
Oh, I grabbed this off of Google, so this was not taken that recently. Okay.
Can you repeat what you just said? Can you repeat what you just said about something about 500?
Yeah, we received public comment requesting that the 500 block of Capitola Avenue be included in the zoning code update for nightly rental. And the suggestion was, because Planning Commission City Council had looked at it prior and had not suggested adding it to the transient rental, the suggestion was if it could be added to the use table to allow nightly rental within that block. So within our zoning code, the way it's structured, if we wanted to add nightly rental, it would go within the vacation rental overlay. And we have had previous conversations on not extending it further up Capitola. So I didn't include that because it's been discussed at multiple previous public hearings.
Okay, just confusing because I thought it was another category you were suggesting, because I'm just trying to deal with
That was
over-
the suggestion within the public comment.
Oh, okay.
Was to,
Not
rather than
suggestion.
include it in the vacation rental overlay, to actually create a place for it within a use table. So,
Okay.
okay. So here's the property that's been discussed. In this slide on the right, on the insert, you can see the property lines. So the building really is built right up to the property lines. Our GIS is typically about 2 feet off when you see the property lines. So you're seeing, I think it should be shifted a little bit to the left if this property were surveyed. So the area outside the building really is not, it's street parking and not on-site parking. And I also want to note that if the city council would like to include 488 Riverview Drive within the vacation rental overlay, we will be noticing, we would send out noticing prior to the public hearing to inform all the residents in that neighborhood of that change.
Discuss it now?
Yeah, so if we could get discussion on whether or not you think it's appropriate to extend. The area in black is the overlay currently.
Would anyone from the audience like to give us their thoughts about this before we discuss it? We discussed it a little bit last time, 48 Riverview.
Was there nobody wanted to speak?
Anyone want to speak on that? Okay. Anytime you want to speak, just jump up and come on up. Ed?
I'll go ahead and start it off. I think that we, in the past, have put a lot of time into this overlay zone, and I know the Planning Commission put a lot of time into this overlay zone. And I know there's a general feeling in the town, and I know that our plan department deals tremendously with the burden of vacation rentals, okay? It causes a lot of complaint in neighborhoods. I think the part of the justification for confining it to the village is a lot of people want to come, there's a place to stay, but I never thought that this was a policy to try to expand areas or to add this, and not into Depot Hill, not into Riverview, not into the Jewel Box. I'm very content. I think we rounded this off. The last extension we did was to kind of close off or continue Capitola Avenue for a continuity. I think that was the last extension, if I'm correct. And I think even that was a push to expand it to that. I personally see no reason to expand this. Like I said, this becomes a burden for us. The complaints of neighbors with VRBO and Airbnb have gone exponentially in a negative direction. So I'm, and plus this is not even a contiguous piece. So by doing that, we open up for neighbors across the street, down the street. I think if we had a hearing about trying to expand the overlay zone, we would have a lot more people in this building. So I'm going to suggest that we approve this existing overlay. I think a lot of thought went into it from the Planning Commission, and I'm totally happy with leaving it the way it is.
Jacques?
So echo Ed's comments, but in this day and age when housing is difficult for people to get, to basically take a building off the housing market to be, a rental on a short-term basis really is going against what I think a lot of us feel we should be addressing, is trying to increase the available housing for the citizens of Capitola and hopefully make that more affordable if we can. Thanks.
Kristen?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's already been said. I think that we have a good vacation rental overlay zone, and we don't need to be expanding it any further. And as mentioned, if we're just going to add that one specific house to the zone, then as Councilmember Bottorff mentioned, that just opens the door for their neighbors and all the way up the street. And I also agree that the housing issue in Capitola and throughout our county is such a big one for people to actually find long-term housing. And I've experienced that personally, and I would not feel good approving getting rid of something that could be a long-term rental to allow it to be overnight or short-term rentals. So I'm going to agree with what was said before, that I don't think it should be expanded.
Yeah.
Just to let everyone know, those who are listening also, I've talked a lot with several proponents of this idea. And, it's true that this would give us more revenue. One suggestion, $80,000 extra a year to extend even further up towards Gales. So, we have to think, what is this town for? So this town is for its residents, and basically this displaces residents. And, I think at some point we have to say, okay, the income's good, getting the extra tax is good, but displacing residents is not the kind of way I want to go. Thanks.
I agree with all the comments also. We've already lost a lot of permanent housing from the village, because a lot of people used to live in the village, but now that's all vacation rental. But I think the people in town are happy that we've limited it to a certain size, because they're seeing the problems that are happening in other towns where it's gotten a little out of hand, and there's a lot of vacation rentals, there's a lot of Airbnbs and so forth, and sometimes noise. So I think we've done the right thing. Ed, your comments are all wonderful, that we have a plan, we have limits. We shouldn't open the door, because then you're going to have somebody else across the street or up the street or down the street or wherever looking for it. So I think what we have is manageable, and it's very appropriate.
Great, thank you. That's clear direction.
Thanks for the map.
Okay, so bring Councilmember Torini back in.
Oh, yeah. Leave them out.
Yeah, leave them out there. No.
And we just had a problem with a new owner of vacation rental at 40-something Blue Gum that built a shed in the backyard illegally, and did they get caught? Did they get red tag?
No, we followed up on that today.
Good, good. Yep. On the property line, building a shed.
So, at our last meeting, we talked in depth about Capitola Road and the change within the general plan and the zoning map to community commercial. I wanted to inform you that after your staff report went out on Wednesday prior to the holiday, we also sent out a letter to all property owners in that area, informing them of what the discussion was the Tuesday night prior, and that we're having this meeting this evening. So we have reached out to private property owners all within that would be affected by the zone change. I did hear from at the AAA property, I think it's Lomac Properties, and they said they think what's being suggested in terms of looking at revisions, they would expect in Capitola. So for the heightened review and that. So just wanted to bring you up to date on these people. Everyone has been notified. And if a change is to take place in this area, it would get noticed to meet our local and state regulations for noticing for a zone change prior to the January meetings. So with that, I'll give you a brief overview for those that weren't here last week, and then we'll jump into the suggested modifications. So we received public comment with concern for the increased height and intensity of the land use along Capitola Road with the change to community commercial. And how this came about was a series of long-range planning and then into our implementation within the zoning code. So there was the 41st Avenue revisioning plan in 2011 that first brought this into play. The general plan land use map modified that section of Capitola Road towards community commercial, and then the zoning map is a reflection of the land use map within the general plan. This is from our general plan, and it's a caption on the 41st Avenue revisioning plan. So I've circled the area along Capitola Road that really gives us guidance to treat that section of Capitola Road similar to the area south of Capitola Road along 41st Avenue. Today's zoning as it is today, there's the CC zone along 41st Avenue. When you get into Capitola Road, it comes down to the neighborhood commercial zone, which is at a 27-foot height limit. Then the professional office zone is to the east, and that has a 35-foot limit, and then it transitions down again to the neighborhood commercial at 27 feet. So this was identified in that 41st Avenue plan, and within the new zoning code proposal, the CC height would be carried through over the CN area and the professional office area at 40 feet. During the meeting last week, the City Council direction was to treat the different sides of the road a little bit differently within the zoning. So the north side of the road, which a portion of it abuts up to single-family homes, they suggested rezoning this to mixed-use neighborhood with a 27-foot height limit. And the lots on that side of the road are a lot smaller, and the CC zone really couldn't be achieved on that side of the road when you look at parking requirements, and we went through that analysis last week. The south side of the road, the city council suggested lowering the maximum height to 35 feet so it would be consistent with that professional office that was there previously. And then any projects that are greater than 2 stories would be required to have an enhanced public outreach and engagement process and also city council approval. So first we'll look at the north side of Capitola Road and the proposed rezone to mixed-use neighborhood with a 27-foot height limit. This is the outline of the area that would be affected. The area in yellow is the area that is currently zoned professional office. So that would decrease from a 35-foot height limit down to a 27-foot height limit. Here's a closer look. I'm going to go through an analysis of what the impacts would be to these 2 properties. They're the larger properties within that PO area. The biggest change for zoning would be the 3-story limit within the PO would be taken away, the 35 feet, and the new height limit would be 27 feet. Another change that would take place is it's within the MUN, there's a residential transition standards that the minimum setbacks are increased. So side yard setbacks, if it's next to residential, increased to 15 feet, and the rear yard setback increases to 20 feet. The daylight plane, that takes effect at the 20-foot setback, and it begins at 25 feet in height. So it really doesn't have an impact within the mixed-use neighborhood zone because we're only allowing them to go up to 27 feet. So that really won't have that much of an influence. But that larger 20-foot setback will have a great impact in separating the uses. So, and then there's a required landscape of 10 feet along the rear property line. So parking couldn't take place in that first 10 feet of the setback. So here are the 2 parcels. It's 4375 and 4401 Capitola Road. So again, a 10-foot setback on the front. That area has to be landscaped. It cannot be utilized for parking. There's a 20-foot setback on the rear, 10 feet of which have to be landscaped. Also 10 feet on both sides. That area can have parking in it though. When I went through the math, it comes out to be a 9,720 square foot building pad that could be achieved at 4375 Capitola Road, and in the neighboring property, a 6,000 square foot building pad when you take away all the setback requirements.
How many square feet?
16,000.
Oh,
So
glasses.
the second story, it could go up to the second story as well. When you factor this in, right now within the mixed-use neighborhood, there's a maximum floor area ratio of 1 that could possibly be achieved on the parcel to the left, but not on the right. Now, take into consideration, this does not show you any parking. So to park this type of building, we'll go into that. So I took the maximum floor area ratio that could be achieved, the 14,000, divided it by the required parking. The parcel on the left would need 61 parking spaces. So you're looking at a much smaller building. There's no way, unless they chose to create a 2-story parking garage within the building, which would be a very inefficient way to utilize their space, could that be achieved? It would probably be a parking lot.
Underground?
Underground would be very expensive. So
Are people doing underground parking anymore? Anywhere?
For hotels, only because of the density.
But not really for commercial, properties.
we seldom see anybody go down on the underground. And then on the right, the parcel on the right, under the maximum that could be achieved of 33,000 square feet, that would require 140 spaces. So today, that parcel has 34 spaces, just to give a reference. So that would be an additional 100 spaces. So they're really, when you take into consideration the parking that will have to happen on these lots, you're not going to see a maximum build out of the footprints that could be achieved within the setbacks. They're going to have to most likely be putting parking in the back, buildings towards the front. We saw a recent proposal on Bromer that came through for a mixed-use development, and it was all the development was on the first, I'd say 40% of the lot, and then the parking was in the back, and it really the parking really drives what you can do in Capitola when it comes to this, the massing on a site. So on this,
A quick
Oh,
question.
yes. Ed.
Can you go back to that previous slide? Did you happen to do calculations like this for CC?
for the setbacks, I didn't, we
What
did.
it would look like, and what would be the limitations, you know, what, this is for the MU, so if it was CC, or, which would be similar with the PO,
You know, it would be just about, it would be the same.
it would be about the same.
It would be the same, except that you couldn't, the big difference is the height. So when you're designing, and you can go from the 27 feet to the 35 or 40 feet, they have more space to go up in their design for articulation and.
But wouldn't it wouldn't meet the shading requirements because that's the south side of the street? And if you went to 35 feet, it would immediately start to draw that shade line into the residential property, wouldn't it?
So if it went to, if this was CC, it also has those daylight requirements. So the biggest difference would be the height. Beyond the 25 feet, they'd have to start building, the building would have to be stepped in at a 45-degree angle. And so it'd be a third story, but it wouldn't be as big of a footprint, it'd be smaller.
Let's look at it at the next meeting, because I think that would make the neighbors feel much better to see that, to see the, schematics of what that maybe could look like
Well,
with the
that's-
landscaping.
I don't think we're even talking about going to 35 or 40. We're talking about a residential height of like 27.
Yeah.
It's existing
So-
at 35 right now.
What I'm saying is, if it went any higher than this, you'd have to start calculating shading, and it would grossly reduce the footprint of the second or third story.
Right. It's
So it's
currently
almost-
zone 35 though,
But I'd
right
like
now.
to see it and show it to people, because the concepts are sometimes hard for people to grasp, what it's really going to look like, how big and the shape of it and that kind of
Yeah,
thing, the size.
And we're not dealing with that 27 feet. We've taken a step in residential neighborhoods to dictate top plate height in order to force them not to be a flat-topped building going all the way to 27 feet. Is there any way we can write that into here so that we don't see someone going to exactly 27 foot with this monolithic, flat-top, frankly, ugly building?
So we discussed that a little bit internally, and that's part of the reason behind our suggestion that the threshold for the enhanced process and a city council review would be based on stories and not necessarily height, so that if somebody came in with a real nice, attractive two-story building that was at 30 feet rather than 27, that would be something they'd be able to do rather than going through an enhanced process. But if it was a third story, that's clearly, I think, what we've heard the community say they were more concerned with.
But if we cap this at 27 feet on that side of the road, how would they be coming with a 30-foot building? I mean, what I'm saying is, if it comes in at 27 feet and it goes all the way to 27 feet and has a flat roof, that's something we've been pushing back on pretty regularly, because that's not what we want.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the community commercial parcels. We could
No.
write in something on that area to limit the height at the plate so that you have some kind of pitch at the roof.
Right. Thank you.
That would be, that's a great suggestion to try to help that. Jacques?
Also, as envisioned in the general plan, we were thinking about this as a transition area from the 41st area down to the city center, or if you want to call it the Esplanade area. And part of that, I think, is walkability, and our sidewalk is pretty narrow right now. So I noticed there's a setback from the curb of, 10 feet, and you want to vegetate. Can we include part of that to be an actual wider walkway so that people will be encouraged? If new businesses are going to open up along there, that might be good for their success. So how would that work in? if
The
possible?
setback, I should have emphasized, so on the rear setback, that's where you have to have vegetation and landscaping.
Okay.
The front setback, the measurement from the curb can also include sidewalk.
Can include sidewalks,
Yeah.
so it's, okay, good.
And we have a boardwalk, sidewalk, with planting, with curb, planting, then sidewalk on the property on the right, but I don't think that exists on the property on the left. It doesn't, once we get past, was it 43rd or 40, whatever that is, the sidewalk narrows to the sidewalk being right on the edge of the curb, which is a really uncomfortable way to walk down the street.
Yeah. Yeah, because, when you contrast the leading just before you get to Shadowbrook, that area is quite nice,
I think we'd all like to see wider sidewalks, however we can achieve that, whether it's in, this area and across the street and other areas of town. It'd be nice to start planning for, I think, wider sidewalks for the future. And whether we can do it or require them to do it, or however I think that would probably be a really good goal for us to have everywhere, is try to see if we can get a little bit wider sidewalks.
So we do have the ability to require dedications as part of discretionary projects, particularly subdivisions. Design permits might be a little bit different depending on the scale. It's got to be proportionate. But we can get dedications to build sidewalks. Usually developers will be agreeable to those kinds of conditions.
And they won't mind if we ask it to be a little bit wider?
Typically, they don't mind. Sometimes, though, as a city, we do have to consider, are we just making a small improvement where it doesn't connect? And so we try to be a little strategic and build those together and comprehensively.
Jacques?
Yeah, so I think we're recognizing that the height differences between the R1 and the MUN not going to be major, pretty much the same.
Yeah.
27 feet. Yeah. So we're not seeing big discrepancies between the residential area and what we're proposing as the MUN. So there'll be fairly good continuity. If there's any shadowing from a neighboring house, we're going to get essentially the same from something on Capitola Road.
So, Council, one point that I think is may not be popular, but I do want to just put it on the table and so everyone is clear, is that I think everyone needs to understand that with this zoning, it's highly unlikely that we will see redevelopment of these projects. So when we start talking about envisioning changes on these properties with wider sidewalks or new businesses coming in, those sorts of changes are driven by zoning primarily. And if the zoning basically lets people do what they already have there today, you don't usually see people tear down and rebuild what they already have today. So I want everyone to be clear that if we do put the zoning in, which may be the appropriate answer, that Councilmember Bertrand, when you're talking about seeing new businesses come on board or those sorts of things, that's probably not a likely outcome in the near term. In the longer term, obviously, when you start thinking multi-generations and buildings sort of losing their useful life, that certainly does become an option. But in the next sort of 10 to 20 years, it's pretty unlikely. I think we'd see a lot of transition.
Well, I think one of the properties was for sale last year. So there may be some action, who knows? Yeah, John?
So I think the reason why we spend so much time on zoning is because it does create potential opportunities for development. And as opposed to being what we had proposed before, we're downgrading it, which is good. But the example you just brought up, Katie, is what's on Bromer. Now those are all residential houses. The one that I think is being redone did have a business in it for a very short period of time, but now it's being developed. And that is a very similar circumstance that I think we're preparing for with the MUN. So I think it can happen. We're making probably more changes, or making it more possible to do changes on the other side of the street where the Dharma site is. And as property values increase, which I think this is going to make that happen, we're going to see people wanting to make better use of their property to realize that value. So I think that's what we're doing.
Ed?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on JV's point because it may not be clear. I know that there might be a consensus almost in the council, but I'm not in agreement with, I think, the direction the council is going. I feel this should be zone CC. I feel like the previous zoning was 35 feet. The complaint that came in was not to have 4 stories or 40 feet, and I was opposed to that. But what exists there right now is 35 feet and 3 stories, which could allow for parking on the first floor and 2 stories. And so I'm thinking that, as was mentioned, there will be no development here with the MUN district because it won't allow for it. If you ever wanted to see any kind of development here that flows gradually away from 41st Avenue with the 40 feet on 41st down to 35 with the potential for development, the CC district does that. So, and I want to remind everybody the general plan approved the CC district, and our planning commission voted to approve the CC district. So I'm just being supportive of what in my position of maintaining the CC on both sides of the street. So,
but you have to remember that when that was done, these people didn't know about it. The people, and I know we had lots and lots and lots of meetings, but everybody doesn't go to meetings. So we did change the zoning. I didn't even remember that. or I would have tried to get people to come and give us the reaction to that. But to have that kind of CC commercial next to residential is not compatible. It's
That's
not
what's
good.
existing,
I
Stephanie,
know.
right now.
That's why I'm saying we need to change it.
I mean, it's
I know.
been that way forever.
It's a mistake that I think happened, and so I'm happy to try to change the mistake. But I think that everywhere in our town, you don't want CC next to residential. It doesn't work. It's too high, too dense, too much traffic, noise, potential. I mean, it could be a wonderful, wonderful neighbor. But, even Gail's neighbors have had problems with noise. So we just have to be really, really careful and sensitive with protecting our R1 neighborhoods and not put CC next to R1 or any of the other areas where they only are going to allow 2 stories. 2-story person doesn't want to, and I know the 3 stories maybe not going to be that huge, but it's just not a compatible land use. And be happy to go out there and walk the neighborhood, and you can talk to the neighbors and about what they would envision the changes in their neighborhood with CC along there, and the traffic and the intensity and the whole character of Capitola, of that area could change dramatically. John?
I have a comment. Yeah. So I'd like to focus on what has actually happened. So the newest building on Capitola Road there, I believe, is the one at 42nd and Capitola, just behind Whole Foods, excuse me. Sorry. Totally different business. I totally know that. Okay. So I believe that's a 2-story building. I'm not sure if it's exact height. Sorry, but it's a 2-story. No, the new development on 42nd and Capitola Road, just behind Whole Foods. Yeah, it's a 2-story building, and it's exactly what we want. It has businesses on the bottom floor and residences on the top. And that's what we're making possible. This is apparently a developer came in there and saw that as a great opportunity. And as far as I know, because I walk the neighborhood too, the neighbors are very happy with that place. They have the parking, and we just had a discussion about the required parking, so that be put in there. So it's not an impact on the neighborhood. The residences above, those are neighbors for everyone else on that street. So I'm looking at what actually has been done. And as our planning staff just mentioned, down the street on Bromer, there's going to be another unit just like what we think would work in that area. So I was on the general plan, and Ed was on it too. And so we thought that this area would be more amenable to higher density development. But the examples I just brought up is basically saying the opposite. Developers come in and they say that this is what we think is going to work in that area. So I think the MUN is going to be very consistent with what we think will work in that neighborhood. And we're seeing from experience, from the developer standpoint, that this is what they think. Now, the other thing that Ed will probably recall is when we talk about transition from 41st down to the Esplanade, we were thinking about a linear transition along Capitola Road. And the more I started thinking about this, I started realizing there's a transition to the neighborhood. And we didn't really address that when we were talking in the general plan discussion. So sure, from 41st down to the Esplanade, just all on Capitola Road, yeah, we talked about that, but we didn't consider the transition to the neighborhoods. So I'm thinking specifically the avenues and specifically to the jewel box and all the multiple housing behind Dharma's. So that's just as important for me in terms of transition. So I think our move is really good.
I'm going to open it to the public first, unless there's any break. Would anyone from the public like to address us? Please come up and give us your thoughts. What would you like us to do? Good evening. Please line up if you'd like to speak. Get ready.
Hello.
Get up and stretch.
Yeah, my name is Evan Soroki. I'm with Santa Cruz YIMBY, and we're advocating for more housing across the entire county. And I would like to recommend you keep the CC zoning or upzone it even further, because we need more housing in this county. Between 2007 and 2014, and countywide, the county gained a population of 21,678 people, but during that same time, only 1,690 housing units were built. So there's a really huge need for more housing right now. And I feel like this is a really good spot to allow for a higher, more intense housing density projects because it is close to a major retail center and lots of jobs in one of the 4 transit centers in the county. There's also really good bike lane access, biking access along Capitola Road and for first to the rest of the county. So that's good also. And it could even, building more housing in here could help alleviate traffic because people can't find housing close to the job centers of Santa Cruz, Capitola, and they'll commute all the way to Watsonville, Salinas, wherever they can find housing. And so I want to further, after seeing this presentation, I would just like to point out that these parking requirements are ridiculous. Like, you're talking about 139 parking spaces. An average parking spot takes up 180 square feet. So that's 25,020 square feet, which is larger than the building footprint. Come on. That's kind of crazy. And so just in general, we need more housing, and this particular site isn't going to solve it county-wide, but every place needs to build more housing. So I encourage you to keep the upzone to CC or go even further. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Erin Bernal, and I am a resident in the Capitola Road area, 42nd Avenue, actually. And I was a member of the General Plan Committee. And I strongly encourage the council to not, to not approve CC zoning for the area stretching from 41st Avenue to 45th Avenues. On the tails of what Jacques mentioned, with this area being a transition area, it is very important to consider that transition does include transition to neighborhoods. And speaking in regard specifically to the example that Council Member Bertrand gave with the housing commercial unit on 42nd Avenue and Capitola Road, indeed, that is a tasteful development, but as a resident of that area, I know that that was kind of a bone of contention before that building was built. Do I have 3 minutes?
No one's timing you, so it looks like you're running right now.
Okay.
I did.
Go for it, Aaron. It's all yours, Aaron.
Okay, anyway, so speaking to the fact of it being a transition area, I think that size, that 2-story example, is a good example of what this area can accommodate. And I think that the existing CN zoning, I'm at a point in my life where I have to put glasses on now to read. The area's existing CN zoning supports the long-term vision of maintaining neighborhood integrity, or as one of our staffers said, the big picture thinking of the general plan, of which I was a member of. The CN zoning allows development that is to scale with 1- and 2-story residential and commercial properties already existing, and it allows Capitola to responsibly and sustainably create new housing opportunities, which I recognize that the entire county is in dire need of. CN allows us to achieve this, as well as commercial use, like I said, that moves forward into the future and is sustainable. And I think it's also very important to take into account that CC zoning already exists on 41st Avenue along the entire stretch, and there are big redevelopment plans on the books or in the idea mill for 41st Avenue, in particular the mall area, which could be another place to accommodate more housing. So let's just try and stick with what we have and make it work, and we can achieve a lot of great things with good design that meets the needs of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I just had one more thing. The letter that you sent out, was that just to commercial property owners, or was that to, where did that go? Because I know that 42nd Avenue didn't get it. Do Do I need to spell my name or just write it?
E-R-I.
Yeah.
We got you.
We know who you are.
You know who I am, and you know where I live.
I know where that palm tree is.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Terry Tedder. I live on Junipero, and I just have two things to say. First of all, the parking ratio is definitely not ridiculous. There are businesses in Capitola where the parking is so grossly inadequate that the employees have to park all over city streets. We definitely need the parking ratio. And the other thing is, and nobody mentioned this, although I thought somebody would beat me to it, over 400 citizens of Capitola gathered together for Vision Capitola, and their overwhelming preference was that this area would strictly be a transitional area, and more housing and heavier zoning would be along 41st. So if you want to know what people in Capitola want, listen to the Vision Capitola group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak? Then I'll close the public hearing, and Jock, you want to start?
Jock is ready.
Yeah. I just want to make one comment to the gentleman that's speaking about the need for more housing in Santa Cruz and the potential that we could add to that. I agree, we do need more housing in Capitola, and we do need more housing in Santa Cruz in general, and affordable housing so the people that work here don't have to commute such long distances. Capitola is actually moving ahead with, I think, a very aggressive program for ADUs. So this is going to, and I was very on the fence in this regard because there's many issues that ADUs bring up, but in a slow, sustained way, there's going to be more ADUs on various home sites in Capitola. So what that means is the neighbor down the street is going to build an ADU, and you're probably going to know who that neighbor is. In my experience, I live in an area where there's a lot of people that rent out rooms in their homes. And usually the neighbors say, I want you to know who this person is. I'm renting it out. I need some extra money, whatever it is, And there's that really good neighborly feeling about the people that sort of move into your area. So I think even though there might be a few more cars on my street, there are, but I have a better feeling about that than other options to increase housing in a dramatic way. So I think over time you're going to see the availability of houses and homes, home sites in Capitola increase. And they're more likely going to be from neighbors that are building ADUs that you already know, and you'll probably be very happy they moved in. So Capitola is actually moving in this direction. We have 3 different types of ADU structures that are going to be available, or options are going to be available, and people could finance them and probably get an increase in rent, or if you want to downsize, which my wife and I are planning, go for the low unit and then maybe rent to my daughter. I have no idea. But anyway.
Can you talk about this subject? Because we need to give you direction about this topic, about what we want to do on both sides of Capitola Road.
Okay. I'm definitely for the MUN version, and I'm very happy about that. I do have a question about the other side in terms of parking in the back, and there were some issues I was wondering about in terms of how that could be accomplished, because as Rich has told me a couple of times, having parking in the back is really good for bringing the building forward. It looks more attractive. Do you have any comments about that? Is that something we could accomplish? So I think there's a side road in the back that, is that something we could do? Or?
Are we doing both sides right now, or just the north side?
I was going to
Or
chime
south
in
side,
and
sorry.
ask the mayor if you'd like to first give direction on the north side of Capitola Road, and then I do have a further presentation for the south side of the road.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
Okay, let's talk about the north side. Is there a consensus of one direction or another, or would someone like to make a motion?
I would move that we keep it CN. I think that the largest property there may very well be developed because it's grossly underdeveloped, even with the parking consideration and
You mean MUN?
yeah, I'm sorry,
MUN.
Sorry.
It's the wrong slide.
MUN. And keeping it at 27 feet, I think that we need some language in there about making sure that the building is not monolithic and fully 27 feet. A quick note about housing, what we're doing is we're opening this up for a second-story housing all the way down here. There's a reason why we have a hard time building super big housing projects. Number one, the county has increased population by 21,000. We have increased population by 0. The last 2 censuses, and I think the last 4, we never broke 10,000. There's a reason for that. We are the densest city in the county. We're probably the densest city along the coast because we're small. So there's only so much we can do. So that is my motion regarding that side. MUN, 27 feet, and please give us slanted roofs, not flat roofs.
I'll second that.
second that. And
Got a second from Kristen? Discussion? You want to discuss?
We don't need a motion.
Oh, okay.
This is just direction.
It's just consensus.
I'd like to
I
add,
motion anyway, yes.
okay, yeah.
I'm just-
Mike likes making
Italian thing.
Comments. Chris, do you have any comments?
Everything I was going to say has already been said, so I echo what's already been said. I think that the MUN with the 27-foot height limit on that side of the road is the way to go. I think we've heard from too many people who had major concerns about height and intensity along Capitola Road, and so I agree with the motion.
I have a question for staff. When would this, what we're talking about now, it would take quite a while for this to go into effect, would it not?
It would. This is within the coastal
Yeah.
area, so
Right.
this will.
My question is, I know that those properties on the north side have significantly higher height limits than we're talking about right now in the current zoning. Playing devil's advocate, I'm wondering if there will be a gold rush to overbuild those sites now before this new zoning goes into place, and how we can hold back to that.
So currently, it is the office, professional office area could be built up to the 35 feet or 3 stories.
Right.
Once this has been adopted and by coastal in this area, the day that becomes adopted, this takes effect for those properties. So if we expect coastal to take at least a year to get through, if not 2.
Right.
And so there is the opportunity that they could build something higher in the meantime under the existing.
Is there any way we could force this to have a design review, a more stringent design review between now and the time that the coastal commission approves it? Because in 2 years, I could have a set of plans and at the front desk easily.
Right now it would go through a design review permit regardless. Once you've go to a second story or an addition over 400 square feet that's visible from the right-of-way, it'll go through a design review permit and to planning commission. At that point, the city council would be an appeal board to any planning commission decision.
Would we have grounds and findings to prevent them from building within the height that it's zoned right now?
I think the short answer to that is unfortunately no, because that would require an LCP amendment.
Right.
However, there still is a controlling factor of the floor area ratio and the parking, which I think is going to make it nearly impossible for any of these sites to develop fully at 35 feet. They might be able to have a small part of a building at 35 feet, but they're going to be so constrained that I don't think we're going to see, a large 3-story, 4-story building there.
I feel a little better. Thank you.
Unless we want to increase our landscaping ordinance or some other measure that would also decrease the footprint availability for commercial properties to develop in the next 2 years.
So anything we do to the ordinance has to be approved by the Coastal Commission, be an LCP amendment.
Landscaping.
Even landscaping, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. If you think of anything else, let us know. John?
Yeah, Mike, thanks for those comments. Is it the intent of the commission here to, city council to increase the parking, the sidewalk width? So I'd like to have increased sidewalk instead of 3 feet or so for that area on the MUN.
I think we have to look at it site by site. You have to look at the constraints, what's on the street, how much room you have available. You may not have room. You can't just have a rule like that unless you kind of go out there and take a look at it and see what's possible. So
Well,
I think that could be a goal for us, but I don't know if we want to put that in the policy right now, because it'll come back to bite us if we do. I have a feeling.
Well, anything that happens there has to be 10 feet from the curve, so I'm just asking part of that 10 feet be a widened sidewalk.
So I think we could write something into the zoning code that a redevelopment project dedicate a certain number of feet of sidewalk space. I would want to work with the city attorney, though, to make sure that that trigger point is appropriate, because whatever exactions the city were to ask a developer for has to be proportionate to their impact. So in other words, if Dartmouth came in, did an exterior facade change, remodeled, refreshed it, I don't know that we could ask for them to dedicate a large sidewalk. If they were to scrape the site, clearly that'd probably be something that would be fair game.
Okay, but I'm talking about the MUN side, but it could apply to both sides.
It's kind of the same concept. You know, you got to be proportionate. You can't ask somebody for a minor project to invest in a big public improvement.
I'll also draw to your attention on page 20-11, the setbacks in the MUN, the front setback areas of the MUN zoning district not utilized for vehicle parking or circulation shall be pedestrian oriented and shall either be landscaped or contain semi-public amenities such as courtyards and outdoor seating areas. But it's really talking about, you know, being oriented towards the pedestrian. So I think within that 10-foot area, you could make a finding of sidewalks would be appropriate.
Okay, that's my main concern.
I had a suggestion for landscaping also, but I'm not sure what section it's in, so I'll look for it.
It's coming
and
up.
then- Yeah, and then let you know.
Got that highlighted too.
Okay, shall I move on to the south side of the street?
Yes, any
Or-
other discussion about the north side? We're all good with that? Okay,
Okay.
we'll go on to the other side.
So, south side of the street, during our last meeting, there was a suggestion to lower the maximum height limit to 35 feet, so that would be consistent with the previous professional office zone, and that all projects greater than 2 stories shall require an enhanced public outreach and engagement and city council approval. One item we can discuss tonight, of course, is the 2-story limit. We looked at different thresholds, what would be the correct threshold for the enhanced public outreach and engagement and the city council approval. It seemed that going over the 2-story limit seemed appropriate because it seemed like that was the major concern of once you get to that 3rd story, there should be more public engagement in the process and heightened review. We also talked about whether or not once you go beyond 50% of the size of an existing building. So we played around with a couple of different ideas, but really it seemed like height was the concern and that should be the trigger.
And to be clear, and especially for the audience, the 41st Avenue being regional commercial, significantly different heights and densities than this area that we're talking about now. So we are in fact down zoning as we go down. And do you have a slide that shows the difference between the size of the properties on the south side versus the north side? Because it does make a difference.
So the area on the south side is outlined in red, and you can see, looking across the street, you can kind of make out the white lines. Those are property lines. So these are, I would say, at least twice as deep as the properties on the north side of the road.
And what is for the 35-foot CC, what is the rear setback?
20 feet.
Minimum 20 feet.
Minimum 20 feet when it abuts residential, and the first 10 feet of that has to be landscaped. So
They can put parking in the next 10 feet.
yes.
So if we were to increase the rear setback, because they're going to need parking anyway, it wouldn't be onerous, correct?
Right.
I mean, these properties are so deep and so large that making it 30 or 40 feet shouldn't make a difference.
Exactly. Yep. The majority of the parking will be towards the back.
So my point being, like behind Darmer's, there's an access road. Apparently Darmer's owns half of that, and then the housing complex behind it owns half of that. So they already have a right-of-way there, which is maybe 10 feet, I'm not too sure. So it's very amenable to having parking behind.
That's an unbuildable easement, though.
Oh,
He's
not
talking
on the
inside the
easement,
wall.
but,
On their own property, on the other side of the wall.
well, it's not really a wall, it's the back portion
Yeah.
of their building. In a sense, it's a wall. So they could come in that way if that whole thing was restructured, that's all.
Okay.
I don't know if those people would want people coming in that way, by their house, like a road.
Yeah.
So
Already road,
what this change would do in terms of the development potential on the table in the zoning code is the 40-foot limit would be, there'd actually be a note added under the CC that would explain that on the south side of Capitola Road, and we'd be very specific about the address, the portion of that road would be limited to 3 stories, or actually to 35 feet. And then it would also elaborate on the public outreach that would be required, as well as the city council approval. The other thing to note within the CC is that there's a 15-foot front yard setback or street edge, and the area must allow for a minimum of 10-foot sidewalk. So the CC is a little bit different, and that is written into the code. And the key word is allow for minimum sidewalk. So it's not saying it's required, but that it will have adequate space for a 10-foot sidewalk.
We should put in there also that we'll stake it so that people can see what it looks like for any development.
Mm-hmm. To understand how that sidewalk would connect.
And did you not say, Steph, that for CC, anything over 2 stories gets automatic design review and council approval?
Yeah.
Okay, it just isn't clear from this slide.
No, so this is just, I wanted to update the table, but really it would be a note underneath the table explaining it.
And I would like to propose, if there's a consensus, that the rear setback in this area of CC be 40 feet instead of 20. Leave the 10 feet of planting next to the residential, but an additional 30 feet so that no buildings can be built closer than 40 feet from the rear property line. In this case, the rear property line.
They would appreciate it. Yeah.
I think, and I don't think it would be terrible to anyone wanting to, redo, like the Dharma building is a prime example, that, if they're going to put their parking in the back, it'll probably be more like an 80-foot setback, but I think we need to keep those buildings as far as we can practically.
Yeah, that'll work the best.
Okay, and as you're familiar, on this side of the street as well, it's subject to the residential transition standards. So, of course, that increased rear yard setback of 20, of which we can continue the discussion of Councilmember Tomini's idea of 40 feet. And that here a daylight plane would be required. So at that setback, we would require that it'd be like the 3rd story, because once you get to 25 feet in height, the building must be built at within an envelope that will have a 45-degree angle.
And at 40 feet from the rear yard, there's a lot less concern with daylight shading as well, correct?
Correct.
Especially since we're on the north side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The sun being where it is, at all.
Chuck.
So I was wondering if you could, do you have a view of the other side of 41st? Where the Chinese restaurants are and stuff? That's going to be...
We're not talking about that.
I know. But I just want to bring this up because in terms of development opportunities, that whole side opposite the sushi place and Target and stuff like that, that's all, I believe, CC or CR. I can't remember exactly. So we could have fairly intensive...
CC.
Yeah, CC. Sorry. So I think what we're doing here is we're trying to take special care for an area of the city that's near residential, but the other areas aren't as exactly impacted by intense residential. So I think that's pretty wise of us to focus on the areas where residential are located as opposed to other areas where we anticipate high development. So I just want to point that out.
Okay, and I just put this slide in as a reminder that the Dharma site is also in our housing element as an opportunity site, and so having that 35-foot height limit would be instrumental in it to make sure that those additional units could be built. Having that variety in height up to 35 feet would help.
Do you have a sense of how many units that could be?
19 units is what's estimated within the housing element based
Okay.
on parking standards.
Okay.
So the city council direction, we've gone over this in the beginning, but to lower the maximum height to 35 feet, and that all projects greater than 2 stories would require the enhanced public outreach and engagement, and city council approval would be required. For enhanced public outreach, the ideas we came up with was we would require a community engagement process. That would be the developer would have to initiate that for the public outreach, and we would require a conceptual review by the city, and during the conceptual review by Planning Commission, City Council, the developer would have to present the outcome of the community engagement that they had done, and also explain how the public concerns are addressed within their design. So that was, with that, I'd open it to discussion and any questions.
And I think there was consensus for that rear setback.
I can go along with that.
Any other comments about the rear setback? Could you, do you want to put a slide up there, a picture of it, and we can take a look at what, of course, the building's way in the back now. Close up. Okay, you can see how the back of the building is quite close to the red line, and then the houses are right behind there. And then as you go down, those houses are right there on the, the other side of the fence and the driveway there,
It
so.
would more be like the building next to it, which is the AAA building, which leaves all of its parking in the back.
Right.
And I think we'd all agree that AAA did a pretty gentle job in locating there.
It is. They are right next to those residences, and they are not a noise problem or anything like that. I think that's very compatible use.
And that's where the wall is. Yeah, there's the wall.
So any other discussion about the rear yard setback there? We'll try to make that work. Okay. Okay, consensus on that. We'll go on to the next topic.
I promise not to make a motion, Linda.
Well, so you could do it.
You're welcome to make it, I just will not record it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Would the public like to speak on this topic at all? Okay, we'll go on to the next one.
I'm having mouse problems, sorry.
Want us to make an announcement or anything for a few minutes?
I'm ready. Here we go. Okay, so the next topic for this evening was the height and the height measurement. So within the zoning code, under the citywide standards.
But I already figured it out.
Oh, okay.
Under, it's chapter 17.48, we took the existing standard for height, and height is measured as the vertical distance from the assumed ground surface to the highest point of the building. And the assumed ground surface is defined as a line on the exterior wall of a building that connects to the point where the perimeter of the wall meets the finished grade. And
Where on the finished grade?
Undisturbed, I think.
Isn't it the average along the length of that side of the house?
I thought we had a better definition, and that's when I looked at, when I looked at this, it didn't make sense. Because I thought we had a clearer definition
You
before.
don't pile dirt up, it was the
No,
undisturbed.
but if that hillside is all undisturbed,
it says
Right.
that
finished.
means,
El Camino Medio.
right, we need to determine where we measure the maximum height of the building. I think measuring it from the front doesn't work, measuring it from the back doesn't work, but I thought we had a calculation for the midpoint, did we not?
We used to, I think, a long time ago.
This is the existing, this is what's in the code today.
Right.
So, I think it could be improved by showing more arrows if you'd like, or would you like it measured from the midpoint?
Well,
of the-
no, what I'm saying is that the sentence, assumed ground surface means a line on the exterior wall of a building that connects the points where the perimeter of the wall meets the finished grade. That is the definition of the entire wall on that side of the house. Every inch of that wall meets the finished grade. The question is, at what point in that finished grade along that elevation do we measure the height of the house?
I think it's at all points. So if you were to do a roof over topography,
So are you saying we take the average of all points along there?
no, at each point, so in this, as you go along the grade, as it slopes,
Right.
you would measure the height. So where you're seeing in this image, all the arrows,
Right?
so we'll start with the lowest arrow. We would measure height at that point. So actually, that shadow you can see of the existing grade, that's it. We'll say it's at 27 feet.
Right.
The envelope of the home would have to be under that.
I just want it to be clear so that if somebody comes in, El Camino Medio or the hotel, that we all have the same definition.
Well, the question I have is, the arrow all the way to the left, if that house were built at that point, could it go to the top of that arrow?
Yes. So a building could step down the hill as long as it doesn't exceed the maximum
So
height
you're saying
as
at any point on the hillside, it can't exceed 27 feet?
Exactly.
I'm trying to envision what that would look like from the front of the house. Because at the back, if you were to project to the height of the house, it would be at 50 feet.
It's El Camino Medio.
Right, I know where this is.
That's how the houses on El Camino Medio
Right.
are permitted.
And El Camino Medio being a very special area, don't we also have a requirement just in that area to keep the face of the hill exposed, regardless of the height limitations?
I don't think that's in any existing regulations today. We did adopt that standard for the hotel site in the general plan.
And I think every time someone has built a house in El Camino Medio, we have,
That could be right.
planning commission has forced that issue. I'm just trying to codify it so that,
Let's look at that language. This is a good time to do that.
but I understand what you're saying now. I accept it for that area. I understand.
Yeah.
Just the county has different calculations.
We just want to be really clear so we don't end up with somebody building something higher than we want it to.
County has a different way of looking at it.
I do think the additional arrows help. We can have Ben add some arrows because then it really shows that it has to be within that limit.
So basically, you want the house to step down the hillside.
Yeah, but fortunately, we don't have too many hillsides to
No, we
worry
don't.
about. So.
So special circumstances.
So the question is, what does our language say for protection of the bluff top? We'd have to go back and we can take a look at that.
I don't believe there is any language, except for the hotel site, that the future village hotel, should it be built, should protect the views both to and from the bluff.
Okay, but there is language that the buildings cannot come up to the top of the bluff.
No, there isn't.
Not that I'm aware of. There could be in the LCP.
Can we
I'm not-
incorporate that language and have it proceed up the street?
Certainly could.
Yeah, let's look at that. That's interesting.
I don't know if this would apply unless there was a house on the bluff. So this, to protect the bluff, we have a setback in the back, right?
I don't believe we do, no. You could technically build into the bluff over there. There are setbacks from the ocean bluffs.
Okay.
I'm just curious, how far does the city's property, where's the property line there? How far does our property go out there from Cliff Drive on the hill? I'd just be curious to know how many. We don't have to give me the answer tonight if you don't have it, but I'd like to know, do we have 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet? Since I paid to have
I can
some of the
pull up the
bushes
graphic.
cleared out there?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's about 10 feet off the back of the curb, the easement.
Yeah.
It's ballpark.
Let's just look at a map sometime. I'd like to see.
Yeah. Well, this here it gives you a pretty good feeling. So that's not 100% accurate, but it shows a pretty good shot of where the city's property line extends to on that Cliff Drive. It actually looks quite accurate when you look at the buildings.
Yes.
I think so.
Well, you can see the edge of the street.
So you think maybe 5 or 10 feet?
So it looks like it varies. It varies. But in many cases, these property lines in the air photos don't quite line up, but in this area, at least sitting this far back, it looks like they line up quite well. So it gives you a feeling it looks to me like probably between 3 feet and 12 feet, if I'm eyeballing it from here.
Other comments about this?
Understood.
Understood. Okay. Okay, next is lighting. I found quite a few inconsistencies actually in lighting. We had different standards. In the International Dark Sky Association, I believe, is the standard that Councilmember Tomini would like to see in the code. And so in trying to make this more consistent throughout the different sections, I've just a few strikeout and underline suggestions. So for lighting, all parking space areas lighting shall be energy efficient and designed so that any glare or spillage, it would say, and directed away from residential properties to minimize light trespass. All fixtures should be hooded and downward facing so the light source, the bulb, is not directly visible from the public right-of-way or adjoining properties, and also that all fixtures must meet the International Dark Sky Association requirements for reducing waste of ambient light. So that's within parking design. Next is outdoor lighting fixture types. So all lighting fixtures shall be shielded so the lighting source, the bulb, is not directly visible from the public right-of-way or adjoining property. We striked the other standard for Illuminating Engineering Society of North America. Thought consistency would be best. All fixtures shall meet the International Dark Sky Association requirements for reducing waste of ambient light and be dark sky compliant. And next is also on outdoor lighting, light trespass, that light shall be placed to direct downward and away from adjacent lots and public streets and to prevent adverse interference with the normal operation and enjoyment of surrounding properties. So within this standard, the previous standard is included, so the fixture types really identifies exactly that it needs to meet the International Dark Sky Association requirements for ambient light. So with that, any comments?
Absolutely brilliant work. If I can be a little wonky, bulbs are what you plant in the ground. There are no bulbs anymore. Just the light source is fine. Thanks.
Any other comments about that? Is consensus on that? That sounds good.
Okay, well, strike bulbs.
Besides, they only
Next.
work in the springtime.
Yeah, this was another good catch.
But every spring, without fail.
Page 16-5, this is the Riverview Terrace. It's just identifying the area in which there are different setback standards can be considered because those buildings are really the homes there are non-conforming in terms of setbacks. We left out a parcel in the mapping, so that parcel will be added to the map. Any discussion on that? Okay,
No.
Good catch. Moving right along. Next, page 64-4, there's a request to remove "or" from this statement about dead trees and riparian corridors. This is in our, I believe, the sensitive lands portion of the code. So it's 64-4, and it states that any removal of trees shall be replaced with healthy young trees of appropriate native riparian species or appropriate habitat for monarch butterflies. Councilmember Bertrand would like the "or appropriate habitat for monarch butterflies" removed, and staff has concern for that. The only area that we would allow the appropriate habitat for monarch butterflies to be planted would be in those areas, obviously the habitat for monarch butterflies, and just we think the Coastal Commission will fight back if we scratch this portion, and it may be appropriate in those areas for the habitat to have a non-native species. So with that, I'll ask for a discussion.
Jacques, what was your suggestion?
Yeah, well, went to a talk of a senior Forestry Service individual, and he made me aware that non-native species are basically killing our native habitat, especially along the coast here. So if you go out to, just as a clear example, if you go out to the McGregor Park, our native oak species that are there are going to be dead pretty soon over the next couple of years because they're being shadowed by eucalyptus trees. So they can't exist unless the sunlight gets their leaves, basically. So I would like appropriate plants to be in our riparian corridors. I think we could find ones that are appropriate for butterflies just as well, considering the fact that butterflies have probably been coming through this area for thousands of years. I don't think we have to replant with something like an eucalyptus tree. So I think we have to balance the needs of butterflies and our native vegetation and other parts of our habitat that are connected with riparian corridors, considering that eucalyptus trees basically kill everything around it, including the oak trees I just mentioned. I'd kind of like another appropriate plant that's just as good for butterflies, but is a native to the area. So that's the reason why I made this request.
Any other comments?
I think we have to leave something in there about the appropriate habitat for monarch butterflies.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be eucalyptus, so I think the way it stands works for me.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of context, as Katie mentioned, there's two places where this exception would apply. One is the Rispin Monarch Butterfly Conservation Area. The other is up by Monarch Cove. In the past, particularly with the Rispin, we have a settlement agreement that you're probably all very aware of, where anytime the city removes a tree, we need to replant. We hire an entomologist to consider the butterfly habitat and an arborist, and consistently they suggest planting acacias, which are not native, but the butterflies like them. So that's why this exception is there.
I kind of like us to consider native plants that are good for the habitat in many other ways, actually. And when you consider monarchs only come through, once a year, something like that, but everything else exists there for the rest of the year, right? So for that brief period of time that they're here, I'd prefer to have a habitat that's good for everything around it. So I would like to see that we plant replacement trees that are just as good for butterflies and for the riparian corridor.
I think it would be interesting to, if and when we do that, we can talk with the butterfly consultant and say, can we do something else other than acacia? Because planting acacias is not a real exciting thing to do. We're trying to get rid of acacia, but if we want to plant it. But on that same topic, I would love it if we can somehow, in our planning department, in a brochure, in all of the planning instructions that people get when they come to the counter and want to get an application, to encourage people to plant milkweed.
Yeah.
Really, really, really want to push that. And just put it in the brochure, put it in the materials, plant some milkweed that's appropriate to this area, because there's a bunch of different kinds, and really try to encourage the propagation of our own butterflies. We have them. We used to have a whole lot, so anyway, if we can somehow work that into our public information, it would be great. We don't have to put it in here, but something.
One point, responding to Councilmember Bertrand's points about is concerned about the riparian habitat. I think they're well placed. I mean, I think that the notion of putting acacias or eucalyptus or Chinese or English ivy into really pristine riparian areas would be a terrible idea. The point that our planning director made, that we're talking about the Rispin property and then the properties adjacent to Monarch Cove where we have the eucalyptus groves, I think we need to keep in mind that those are areas that are very heavily impacted already. They're not native riparian species at this point, and the plant palette that would even potentially survive on the Rispin property is relatively low. There's very few native plants that will survive in a eucalyptus grove at this stage. So I don't know if that helps, but when you're putting it in that context, we're not talking about kind of expanding that area. This is talking about working within these two zones where effectively we have eucalyptus forest today.
Any other comments?
I think everyone can make.
I'll go along with Councilman Termini's suggestion to leave the language as is.
Any other comments? I think the consensus is to do that, but you got the message that we're not crazy about eucalyptus or acacia, so let's see if we can find some other plants that'll be just as appropriate. Okay.
I completely agree with our city manager that the palette in those areas is pretty much, the forest is ruined, and what lives on the bottom of the forest is ivy and droppings from the eucalyptus trees, which is basically habitat for rats. And that's what we're getting. So my suggestion would be on the periphery, you start planting other trees that over time will still be appropriate for butterflies, not for rats. And gradually as eucalyptus trees die, which they do and they fall over, then we get a forest that's more of a native source, for the environment.
It's a great idea. Okay, next topic.
Okay, next.
Unless anyone would like to speak on this from the public. Okay, thank you.
Next is add parking requirements for mobile home guests, and this is on page 76-3. And a request, right now, mobile home parks require 1 parking space per unit plus 1 for the office. And Councilmember Bertrand.
I had this suggestion, started thinking about when the Hill Street parking issue came up, and a lot of comments in the neighbors was that There's no guest parking or very little extra parking in the adjacent mobile home park, and so they were spilling over on Hill Street. Of course, it's public property. It's available to anyone, but this, moving forward, if there's any adjustments to our current mobile homes, this might make it a little bit easier for adjacent residents. So that's why I put it in.
Have we determined whether we're allowed to even create regulations within mobile home parks?
So the existing parks are regulated by the state, so we have limited regulatory authority over those parks. But if somebody came in to create one, which seems unlikely, we could require them to provide guest parking spaces.
But you know what? I'd be happy to write a letter to our senator and our assembly member and say, you know, we'd like some help with this mobile home park issue, and we'd like a little authority, a little land use authority in them, and see if they would ever give us a crack, because it would be nice to have a little more authority in those for parking and height and regulation and things like that. But that's probably not going to happen. But it would be, you know, just to say that we have this parking problem. You have parks where the owner won't let people park on the road overnight, so they have to park. They can't, if they have two cars and they only have space when they park on the street. We're taking away parking on Hill. Parking's a problem other places, but they have the roads, they're clear. They have the fire lanes, but they won't let them, you know, park on the street. And seems like that's a good, pleasant place, and wonderful place to park, but, Jack?
So we have a lot of mobile homes in this, mobile home parks in the city, and we like them because it provides affordable housing, and I think that's a good thing. But the situation in mobile homes have changed. It's not just 2 people per mobile home now. So when I've done walking in the mobile home parks and my campaigning, I notice there's several people extra, if you want to put it that way. It's whole families in many cases. And so that requires many more cars than the original mobile home parks were designed for. So I think this is a minimal way to try to accommodate that.
So we can add a standard, it would only come into play if there was a new mobile home park. So would you like to add 1 per 5 for guest parking, or 1 per 5? Or 1 per 10? I mean, we can create a standard, or we can add it, we can look at other standards that are out there and put it in the red lines.
I think in view of the unlikely event that someone builds a mobile home park that doesn't exist yet, I think, you know, 1 for 5 works fine.
Yeah. There are some parks here that do have extra parking for guests and stuff like that.
Do we have a number what they have, what that is? For
Yeah. There's one off through
We'll compare other cities and
1 per 10 would probably be more
1 per 10.
realistic.
That works too. I think 1 per 10 is right where about Turner Lane is.
Sure.
Yeah, let's look at 1 at 10. That sounds better.
I think that's
Yeah.
fine.
It's kind of 1 for 30 at Castle, or no,
No,
or
I
at
think 1
Cabrillo.
per 10 is if someone does one, that would
Sure,
work.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
all in.
Okay, all right, very good.
Okay, next is large residential care facilities. So within the large residential care facilities, small residential care facilities are allowed, and they're treated as any other residential development within the city. Councilmember Bertrand asked that we look at the language for separation, and currently the language is that a large residential care facility in a residential zoning district shall not be located within 500 feet of another large residential care facility. And his request was to remove the second large, so it would be within 500 feet of another residential care facility. Our city attorney has weighed in on this, and in removing the second large, we could have a problem. We're most likely creating a problem with the state because we can't regulate the separation between small care facilities. So by creating a defined separation between large and small, by removing that second large, it would be could possibly be an issue with the state. But with that, Councilmember Bertrand wanted to discuss this evening, and
Did you want to say anything about it? Why you wanted to do this?
Right. So in San Francisco, I was on a mental health advisory board, District 5, for about 2 years, and I inspected multiple facilities, and I noticed in areas where there was a larger concentration, it wasn't great for the neighbors. So I realize we cannot control the distribution of small residential care units. So that be it as it may, I would just like to be able to put some emphasis on controlling where the large ones are, since they'll have a greater impact.
And what are the impacts that you see? What are the problems?
Well, I mean, this does.
This is existing language, correct?
This is exactly doing that. So that
I'm taking out the large.
No, not taking out the large. Having several large ones in the same area, this prevents that.
That does, yes. But if there's a lot of small ones, I just want to have a little separation between the large one and the small ones.
We have
'cause
no
that's the only thing
control.
we could do.
We have no control over the small ones.
That's correct.
And if someone builds a large one, you can have 30 small ones built right after that.
Yeah, well, so if there's a concentration of small ones, or wherever they may be, then I want to make sure one that has more impact is a little bit further away.
And tell me what the impacts are.
Okay, so okay, I'm coming up to.
Can you define large and small?
I could go
facilities,
into
please?
many things, but that's really, I think, irrelevant. I think maybe that's a side conversation. I mean, I'm
Well, I just
talking.
want to understand your concerns, and everybody
Oh, okay,
understand your
okay,
concerns,
okay.
and people
So,
hear, what are you concerned about? Maybe I'll be
I
concerned.
went to
after I hear
visit a
about it.
friend of mine on Funston Street. He worked at a mental health facility, and I walked up, and there's this woman coming down the stairs, screaming her head off, and she's about ready to go outside. Okay, and this is maybe because when people start wandering, you can't physically stop them. I was able to stop her because she was wondering who I was. Her attention got deflected. So that was one case. Another case, I actually lived in a mental health facility because it was an apartment house and I was on the bottom floor. And as people streamed out of the top and stuff like that, they were interacting with everyone else in the neighborhood, and very unusual interactions, if I say. So what I'm suggesting is that if there's too high of a concentration, and I'm not against these facilities, believe me, I wouldn't have been on that mental health advisory board if I was. But what I'm suggesting is I would like to make sure there's not a large concentration, and the only lever we have here is where large mental health facilities go. And that's the only thing that we can do. So I'm saying if we have any ability to say where they go, I'd like to make sure that they don't go near where smaller units are already, out of deference to the communities that people live in already. And that's my point.
And what is the definition of a large residential care facility? Where do we give me an example of one?
7 or more beds.
We're talking about a SNF, a skilled nursing facility?
No, it can't be a skilled nursing facility. So the definition is state licensed residential facility providing social and personal care for residents, includes children's homes, homes for the elderly, orphanages, self-help groups, and transitional housing for the homeless, excludes facility where medical care is a core service provided to residents, such as a nursing or convalescent home.
So I'd be happy to weigh in on this issue because I have an opinion about Councilmember Bertrand's question of whether or not this is a possibility. I think arguably it is not, because the state law health and safety code provision that's applicable requires a small facility, one that serves 6 or fewer persons, to be considered the same as a single family or as a family residence for all purposes of all local ordinances, not just those regulating small residential facilities. So arguably that would also apply to an ordinance regulating large residential facilities. So therefore, if a large facility were to be proposed in a certain area, then arguably treating a small residential facility nearby as a barrier to doing that would run afoul of that state law provision.
I'm just trying to see if there's a problem, or there might be a problem, or where there could, to understand this issue a little bit. We haven't had anybody, ever come to us for a large residential facility. I don't see us doing it, but it could happen. Smaller ones, you just have to permit. They're just there. So if somebody came in with this, what would be your concerns? I mean, if they're making an application, it's going to be where the Chinese, one of those Chinese restaurants is going away, they want to build a residential care facility. So would you be okay with that, because there's nothing else around there?
Well, there actually is, but there's not a large concentration. There's one down near Target. So I'm not against residential facilities, definitely not. Like I said, I work for an agency that its whole purpose was to make sure that they fit well in the neighborhood and that they were run properly. And I full-heartedly devoted myself to that for 2 years. I have nothing against that. What I'm trying to do here, and it looks like we may not be able to, is just to deal with the issue of concentration. That's my main point. And if our city attorney says we can't actually do that, then I accede to your opinion. But that's what I wanted to bring. I was told that this probably wouldn't fly, but I wanted to bring it up for discussion so that we had an idea to weigh in, that we had a time to weigh in.
Information.
Yeah.
Ed?
I just want to recommend we keep the language as in A, as it is in A.
Any other discussion from the audience or from anyone here, or Tony, any other, I mean, I don't see it being a problem, but, you know, we didn't see today things that are problems, 20 years ago either, so.
Yeah, I just looked at the issue from a legal perspective. So whether or not having multiple small facilities near each other, creates a problem with an overconcentration, I think that's really more of a policy question for the council to grapple with. But from a legal perspective, in my opinion, there's a strong argument to be made that you can't prohibit a large facility solely on the basis that a small facility is located nearby, because the state law considers that to be a standard residential unit for purposes of all local ordinances.
So I'm still trying to figure out what these are. These are privately run?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, a lot of them are transitional homes. So once, I know of one in Capitola that when somebody's maybe been in jail and they're transitioning back into typical life, they live in one of these transitional homes where there are very stringent rules enforced, but they have a bedroom and there's a property manager that lives on site and is there 24/7, and they rotate in and out. And that's what they are. So they have to abide by the rules or else they're not allowed to live there. But there's also people with health issues, that there are different homes have different purposes. So that's one example. But once it comes to nursing facilities and health, it's at that level of health care, it doesn't fall under this regulation.
I just want to make one comment. I just want to make clear to the city council here and everyone that's listening that I am not against these facilities. Believe me, we have to do whatever it takes so people can transition back into society. And these facilities provide a much needed resource to do that. So my only point is that I just don't want concentration built up, and I thought this might be a way to deal with that, and that's why I brought it to City Council.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I wasn't too familiar with the subject. So that's good. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on then. Is that? So the next is page 96.18, and one of our favorite conversations about mobile food truck vendors. The last time, actually, the City Council looked at this, the most recent update was that mobile food vendors would be allowed in one location 2 times or less per year in compliance with the code, and that mobile food vendors in one location more than 2 times a year would require a conditional use permit. And Councilmember Bertrand would like that lifted to 4 times per year, that you could have a mobile food vendor and not require a conditional use permit. So,
And this is on private property?
Private property, it's,
Good.
at a place of commercial business, a business location, so would typically have parking. But if they're having some type of event,
We had one at Bay Federal. They had a food truck there for their
Anniversary.
for their 60th anniversary, and lots
and they
of
can, under this standard, they'd be able to have 3 more parties instead of just 1 within a year. So right now, the limit is 2, and the request is to go up to 4.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And you had a food truck at the plein air, which was wonderful.
We did.
Wonderful, yeah.
They closed early because there was no one.
I'm good with 4.
Yeah, good.
Any other comments about this? Okay, consensus about
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking of Darius. I mean, they have the need for food trucks when they have an opening.
They're a problem. I don't know if we'll talk about that later.
That's a different thing.
We said 4, not
Yeah, so, yeah, thank you. Okay.
So the last slide I have for you this evening is, it's regarding page 148-3, and this is for the language for noticing. And within noticing, there's a posting requirement, and the posting requirement says a printed notice shall be posted at the project at least 10 calendar days prior to the hearing. Our posting requirement is not very specific. As a staff member, I think it's preferable to be not too specific within the code, and then we can always get direction from the Planning Commission and City Council if you'd like to make the posting larger. If the suggestion by Councilmember Bertrand was to actually have these posted on utility poles, and in talking, I would suggest that we leave the language as it is today, but if we want to have discussion on us changing how we post things, I think that would be an appropriate conversation to bring to Planning Commission and City Council and change it as an administrative motion rather than codifying it in the code.
So right now, you're just asking us to go with the at least 10 calendar days.
So right now, I'd like to keep it as it is, and I think we'd have a separate conversation about posting if we'd like to change how we do it
But
currently.
we'll have the ability to enhance posting in another conversation, should we desire.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you say we can post on utility poles or not?
You know, we can. We
can, but other people can't. I don't think we can.
Oh, I wasn't aware of.
Well, you know,
but we
we
can look
have.
into that.
We've been known to.
You know what? I
We've
think
been
it's-
known to,
It's
yes.
a great idea because it's visible, and when you're walking down the street or driving and riding your bike down the street, you're not seeing a little sign like that on the house.
Right.
You know, it really would be nice if it was a little more
You
prominent.
know, we can put posts in the ground in front of a property and
Yeah.
have a standard. We can do
Okay, we
larger
won't do the telephone
postings
pole.
if you'd like, but it would really be appropriate to keep it out of the zoning code and more of a policy.
Yeah.
I think more than one posting per project makes sense too. Sometimes there's just a single 8.5 by 11, and it's just, phew, the neighbors never see it.
Well, sometimes you can't
Having
even
been the
find it.
one
It's
to
behind
post these,
bushes.
it can be very challenging to find places to post
No
and
doubt.
to put it, and ways to attach things. I will say stucco is really, really hard.
If we have a portable sign to put it on and attach it, that would be great. That'd be wonderful. Get some.
Get stakes.
So I'd like to make a
It
comment.
does affect landscaping and fences and, you know, in a general sense, it sounds simple, but once you're faced with where you're going to put it on a property, flexibility, I would encourage flexibility because it's difficult to know what you might be dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I brought this forward because all too often, as we all know, up here in city planning for sure, we get comments that I never heard about that meeting, or I never heard about that application for renovation of a house or something like that. So I put this forward because I think it's about time that we come up with an effective way to make sure the public gets a better idea of what's going to happen and has enough warning. 10 calendar days is fine. That something's going to happen, gives them time to prepare.
Okay.
Okay, that wraps up my presentation. Any additional items to be discussed?
I have some, but go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I have one. I know we went through the ADU and the 4,000 square feet. I think in our discussions regarding ADUs, we need to reinforce the notion that ADUs are not for transient occupancy. I know we have a transient zone, and that's one level of protection, but I think it needs to be written into each permit as we approve ADUs. This ADU is not to be used for transient rental. Because the level of avarice in the country right now with regard to Airbnb is remarkable. And that's going to be a lot of people's outlook.
And I'm seeing nodding of heads, so that looks like consensus on that. Okay, we'll build that in.
Seems like that discussion rings a bell.
Yeah, so one suggestion I did put in that you didn't capture, and that is that one, so council members are probably aware that a person could get out of the requirement to live on the property where an ADU is. at this point, if they have an extenuating circumstance. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that doesn't continue. You know, I want to make sure that when the property is sold and stuff like that. So I think you address that.
It is. Within the code, there's a way in which a person can approach the planning commission and get permission not to live on the residences if there's extenuating circumstances.
It has to be renewed. And
but
How do you define that, though?
you know, it would be, it would be, they'd present their case, and the planning commission can either grant or not grant. So we were giving the example of if someone were to move to Europe for a year and know that they're only going to be gone for a limited amount of time, the planning commission could condition it that they come back in a year to either, if they can't move back in, to have it extended again. But anyway, it's pretty open-ended, so it can look at any circumstance and decide whether or not to approve it. But during that whole time, the deed restriction that's placed on the home would not be removed. So if the home were to sell, that would still be a deed restriction tied to that property that the owner would have to either live on the main house or the secondary unit. And so it is protected.
And to be clear, this is only for homes with ADUs.
Correct.
how is that deed restriction implemented? How does that come about?
At time of building permit, before issuing a building permit, we require that to be recorded with the county recorder.
Okay, thanks.
I have some comments. Kristen, do you have any more? Ed, do you have any more?
I have nothing.
We may comment on your comments, though.
Well, I'm just going to make my usual comments I make every year, just to be consistent. I don't like the PD zone. I don't think it served us well. I don't think it'll serve us well in the future. I know it's going to be changed to reduced to a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. So maybe it'll work better. But my feeling is that it's just a zone that allows people to squeeze in as much as they can, as we'll allow them to squeeze in. And that's what I've seen in the past. And I don't think it's good planning. It's spot zoning, and that's not good planning. I think in the future, we're going to have to be really, really careful about the floor area ratios, and my comment on 31 was if we're not going to count the decks and basements and other areas, then we're going to have to be really, really careful that we're not going to see overbuilding. And I just want to be really, really cautious that we're not going to be overbuilding this town, and that's all, in the eye of the beholder and in the eye of the community. So I think it's going to be the community that's going to have to keep an eye on what we're doing, and in the next few years, let us know whether you like it or you don't like it. Whether it is getting too crowded, too big, too much, not enough parking, too much traffic, we already have. So I think we just need to really keep our eye on the direction that we're going. Is that a good direction? Do we want to change it at all? What do we want to do?
That's a good question.
I've got a few minutes. And my comment about the accessory structure setbacks, we have a 3-foot setback. I don't know how many people want anything 3 feet from their property line. So I think we're just going to have to see how it goes. And if people can tolerate it, if it's not too high, it doesn't seem too massive, we're just going to have to see how that one goes. I am concerned about 38, and my comment was on landscaping materials. I'm concerned that the projects, with projects possibly landscaping with only rocks or stones or decorative hardscape aren't going to have enough greenery, living plants. And I know we have a horrible water problem. We have to be really careful, but I really still want to maintain the quality of Capitola and the landscaping, which has always been very important to people in Capitola. Trees and landscaping have been very important to people in Capitola for forever. And so now we're going to this new modern look and drought tolerant look and so forth. And so, yes, we are going to require 25% of for landscaping. Landscaping may consist of, the Planning Commission talked about it, and with to maximize the allowed hardscape within a non-residential zoning up to 75%. We're talking about commercial here. But if that commercial property says that have to do 25% living trees or a mixture of living and rocks, I want to make sure it's not all rocks and too little bushes. That's my point. That's my point. And they'll come in and they say, I did it, I got all the rocks and all these other things, and within my 25%, and I got the 2 plants there, but it looks terrible. So I don't know how we want to change, let's just think about that.
Are we going to include artificial grass?
Yeah, that's green,
Okay, good.
but I don't care. I mean, but living would be better, of course. Do you want to have that or not?
No, not according to Soco Creek Water District, but that's
No, we'll
okay.
take it out. Hotel parking, thank you for the comments on that, I understand that now. I had forgotten that we do have this whole plan to do, if anyone does a hotel in the village, we will do a parking study.
I would like to speak on that just for a second. I think that looking at Monterey, where they're not talking about the square footage of the office for employee parking, but rather 2 employee parking spaces for every 50 rooms makes more sense, because the office, like in the Best Western, could be 150 square feet, maybe. So there's no other way to gauge it, where I think the number of rooms is a good connection to how many employees will be working in the hotel. Just a thought.
It depends on the number of employees, and I worked in a hotel for 5 summers, so you may have a lot of employees, and where are they going to park? What's their parking plan?
Right.
Can't be move it every 2 hours, well, because Oscar and Ben are going to give you a ticket. That's not a plan. So,
Don't mess with Oscar and Ben.
so,
Oscar and Ben won't be writing tickets for the hotel, I guarantee you that.
so I'm really curious. Yeah, we have these standards for the other cities. I'd like to say, is it working? Where is it working? Are the employees parking on site, or riding their bike, or riding a bus, or carpooling, or are they parking out in the neighborhoods? I'd like to find out. Are they? Is it working? Does it work? I don't know. So, but anyway, I was worried about that, but when and if a hotel is proposed here, we will go over it thoroughly for its parking requirements. I'd like to talk about the noticing requirements again, and I think we changed it and added the renters, because previously they were just going to the property owners, and the renters weren't getting it, and people were coming here and they hadn't gotten the notice. But I think now, did we change that, or can we change that? We should consider changing that now, that the resident of the property and the property owner get notices. Well, you can get back to me next time on that if you want to. I give you a list of things.
The
I agree.
Planning Commission reviewed it and did not recommend making a change.
Well, we have to do that. We cannot have angry people come in here that are renters and they didn't know anything about it.
Well, that's one reason why I'd like to have signs on poles and things like that.
But people deserve a notice, a public notice, a postcard. The postcards that are hard to understand anyway. You don't know what it's for, people throw them away.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. Anything that better notice.
They're mailed to the resident, not
Yeah,
the
just mail it to
owner.
resident.
I'm going
mail
to
it-
ask for Linda's assistance on the protocol that we utilize now. Does every notice go to the residents as well as the property owner?
I don't believe
Yes,
so.
it does.
It does?
Does?
So we changed it.
I-
Then we change it.
Because they used to get notices from the tax office, and that just lists the property tax owner.
Because the last time I had to,
The county GIS also provides us with, we get owner occupant, absentee occupant, resident.
so we,
And so
the
that's what we
resident,
have been mailing.
So it does get sent to the
If there is
resident.
an absentee owner, we get a label also for a resident. That is what we have been doing. That has not been a requirement. That's just been, it's not a state requirement.
only if it's an absentee owner? How do we keep track of that?
We don't, the county does. It's, the idea is that if the tax bill goes to the same address as the property, it's considered an owner occupant. And if the tax bill goes somewhere else. So sometimes if they've got a PO box, they're getting two. But
Okay, well, on that same subject, I would like to make my annual request to increase the noticing to a larger area. We had that problem on Depot Hill when only some part of the notices, part of the people got the notice. on something like that, everybody on Depot Hill should get a notice about that. And if we have another project that's coming up, I think we should consider increasing it from whatever it is now, 500 feet?
300.
300 feet? That's not very much. And, and increase a little bit. I know that's, increase the cost, and it may not, solve everybody's problem, but it would, I think people would maybe feel better because we have a broader notice for people. It's not just, I didn't get a notice because I live around the corner. It still affects everybody. So I'm not exactly sure what that number is. We've talked about it before, so maybe I can come back with.
We've used state standards.
Well, I think we ought to have Capitola standards. We should have our own. So I'd like the council to think about that.
The next meeting, we can bring in kind of an estimate of what the number of notices, what the effect would be. And I would just share from my experience, no matter how wide you make it, you can make it 1,000 feet. A person at 1,005 feet is going to say, I
That's
was
okay.
outside.
I can say, no, but I'm sorry, we went to 1,000 feet. Sorry, but I can say, I feel justified by that. I'm okay with that, but 300 feet seems just.
The other, when we talked to the Planning Commission about this, they had asked the question, can they, for certain projects that are, say, the skateboard park, can they request a higher level of noticing? And you can always request a higher level of noticing for controversial projects. So say if the hotel project were to come in for the village and we were directed to notice for all property owners within 1,000 feet, we could go ahead and do that. So you always have that ability.
Yeah, and I know we have done that. I know we did that on Depot Hill. We said we did want the entire neighborhood noticed, and they were.
I would rather use
I
the
would
words-
also say that there's, you talked about the postcards being thrown away, and I think if you're getting a postcard for something every 1,000 feet, you're getting a postcard very frequently, and they are more likely to be ignored.
Capitola. People are used to it. People are used to knowing everybody's business. And hey, there's something going on down the street. What is it? I want to know. I mean, that's just the city we live in. People like to know what's going on.
I would rather use the word significant projects than controversial. Just,
Significant makes more sense.
So anyway, we went over the other one, 38, with just the percentage. Do we want a percentage of living material in that? That was my suggestion. I didn't quite make. But in the previous landscaping, the hardscape, maybe we want a percentage of living material to say at least 50% living material or something like that. I'm not sure.
But let's include artificial grass.
Do we want to?
Yes, because it's getting to be popular with the water standards, and also I've seen a lot of attractive installations.
Yeah.
And if I were to take out all the artificial grass, there are about 10 houses on Bay Avenue and Beverly and all those streets that would not be in compliance. So I think we have to include that since it's being fostered by the water district.
I think the water district is, nobody in the water district is saying, hey, we're out of the woods and we're safe. And so I would really be reluctant to change anything, because I think a lot of people have made a lot of sacrifices. Some people just have let their yards go dead because they want to believe they're supporting the water district. So I don't see us adding enhancement now as a positive method, because we're not out of the woods by any means with the water. And so I'm really reluctant to change any language on this. I appreciate your comment about the artificial grass, because that's not an issue. But I know that if we had SoCal Water making a recommendation to us now, they would not want us to add one plant. Okay, I believe that's where we're at. We have not resolved that issue.
And I know you all like drive-throughs, so I lost that battle, but I just have to bring it up again. I don't think we need any more drive-throughs in Capitola, but that's just a comment on the quality of our town. And I know you'd all like love an In-N-Out burger or something else like that, but I just don't think it fits the character of our town. I think we would do better having standalone restaurants and cafes and things like that rather than more drive-ins. So anyway, I have some more little things, but I'll save them for the next meeting. Maybe get them to you for the next meeting.
One question.
Yes. Or we want to wrap.
When's our next meeting?
You want to wrap it up tonight?
The next meeting is January 11th. At the January 11th, the plan was to ask for a first reading for the zoning ordinance. So if there are any, right now would be the appropriate time if there's additional materials to discuss, so that on the 11th I can be prepared with any tweaks.
I think all of us dream city zoning rules at night. We've been going over this now. Of course, you probably
are really going over.
So
I-
if
I
there are
just-
any additional amendments, we could talk about it now.
Let's look at the language for decks.
For decks, okay, in the floor area ratio?
That was going to be my
So-
question. I wanted to know where we go on decks. I mean, how much of a deck is required? I mean, how far of a deck can you go? I mean, you could push a lot of deck on second floor all over the place.
So within the citywide standards, I'm just going to get to the right page and then we'll jump into the conversation. Floor area ratio is 17.48040. And one thing I can tell you is that decks on the second story would require a design permit by planning commission. So it's not just that whether or not they're allowed within the floor area ratio, but also second story decks require a design permit by planning commission. So it wouldn't be an administrative approval. I think there's an exception to that, and I'll make sure, but I think it's for decks facing the street and decks facing open space, but I'll.
So what page are you on for that?
So, 48-4 is floor area and floor area ratio. For all of, under point B6, for all uses, the following features are excluded from the floor area ratio calculation: covered or uncovered decks and patios.
I just want to make sure we have real clear language so that future councils can carry on the history of allowing decks if they're going to be in the front and not going to overlook someone's private property, and they're not going to allow them in the back if it's going to be a privacy issue for the neighbors.
Mayor?
Yes.
I believe we had this discussion, and I believe this has gone through the planning commission, so I don't know why we're rehashing
I
this
just wanted to
again.
double check to make sure that it was.
Well, I remember this is a lengthy conversation that we had establishing this, and we put in the rules about the second floor decks, and we were trying to promote the front yard decks and people getting out, and I mean, we belabored this for a long time, and it's got complete approval of the planning commission, so I don't know why we're bringing it up again at this point.
Because I had a question about it, that's all.
And it's pretty clear.
Okay. Upper floor decks and balconies on the side or rear of a home that are not adjacent to public open space would require design permits. They would go before the planning commission for approval.
Thank you. Any other items anyone would like to discuss?
I'm good.
Then
We can continue to January 11th for the first reading.
would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we continue to January 11th.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, and good night, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you very, very much.